Invest Africa, proudly brought to you by KPMG.
Welcome back to Invest Africa. We're bringing you the big conversations around Africa Utility Week, but also earlier on in the week on the channel, we chatted with the CEO of Eskom, and this is on the back of news that South Africa has not had any load shedding since August of 2015. And if we put that into context, that's about 9 months of no load shedding. The president of the country has also promised that there will never be any load shedding in South Africa going forward. Eskom presented a dramatically improved picture in electricity outlook and efficiencies, and they claim that this could support South Africa's growth story. David Williams and myself sat down with Brian Molefe, the CEO of Eskom, and to better understand from him what the issues around the financial sustainability of the utilities are, and of course not forgetting the politics that he has to deal with on a daily basis. Brian, thank you for making the time to join us. You say that the lights will stay on throughout winter, and of course all the critics have also pointed to the fact that the economy is significantly under pressure and that there's been reduced demand, and this is why the lights will stay on. How are you responding to this criticism once again?
I'm not sure that that is a criticism. The lights have been on for 9 months. If you look at demand, if you compare this year to 2008, demand has decreased quite dramatically. But if you look at demand last year for electricity as well as demand this year, you will see that there is not much of a difference. So the assertion that it is because of lower demand does not explain the phenomenon between last year when there was load shedding and this year when there isn't. What explains the difference between this year and last year in terms of the absence of load shedding is the fact that we have increased capacity and we have also improved the energy availability factor, which means basically the efficiencies of our machines has improved.
Brian, what would you say was the key 1 or 2 things that have happened in this period to really improve the productivity of Eskom, to improve the supply? What have you done, in other words, to make things better?
Last year we said that we need about 3,000 megawatts to get rid of load shedding. Last year this time we said that. In fact, our information officer was pointing out that last year on this day, on exactly the same day as this one, last year we were on stage 2 load shedding. What has improved is that the energy availability factor has improved from about 70% to 76%. That's about 2,500 megawatts of electricity that we did not have last year on this day. And in addition to that, Medupi Unit 6 has been commissioned. And that was another 700 megawatts. And we have now synchronized Ingula Unit 3 and Unit 4. That's another 333 megawatts that is now available. And that is the difference between last year and this year. If you look at demand, last year, winter, and this year, you will find that, in fact, demand was similar. So it does not explain the demand story does not explain the difference between last year and this year, but it explains maybe the difference between 2008 and today.
Hi there, it's Governor here. Just a question. Of course, we know that demand has maintained itself over the last year or so, but that's also because the GDP growth in the country has been pretty much flat for the last year. Just how much of growth can Eskom basically, handle if the economy does start growing at the rates that we should be growing to decrease things like unemployment, achieve the NDP, etc. Is the kind of capacity coming online is sufficient to support that kind of growth rate? And of course, no new capacity is coming online, as was mentioned, but how much of old capacity, because of plants running out to the end of their lifespan, etc., has gone offline? So what's the net increase? Is it all the new capacity net increase, or is there been stuff taken offline as well?
Between this year and last year, we have not had any capacity going offline. We started last year with 43,000 megawatts of available capacity or total capacity that is potentially available. We are now at about just over 44,000. This will increase to about 52,000 in 2022. 2021, 2022, 52,000 megawatts. So we're looking at Medupi coming online, Kusile coming online, and the rest of the units of Ingula also coming online. We think that that will be enough to carry growth in electricity consumption over the next couple of years and support GDP growth. We already in a situation where we have surplus capacity. We demonstrated during today's State of the System address that at 6 o'clock in the evening we had excess capacity of 444 megawatts. During the day we had excess capacity of 4,000 megawatts, 2,000 of which was sold to our neighboring countries. We're quite confident that we should be able to support the South African economy's growth going forward.
Brian, of course, there's been a lot of talk around the influence of the Guptas at Eskom at a board level. We also had the former chairperson, Zola Tsotsi, saying that he stepped down because of influence from the Guptas. There's been reports that you have confirmed that you have a familiar relationship with the Guptas. Can you give us an indication of the nature of your relationship with the Gupta family and whether there is some degree of undue influence in terms of how they might influence decisions at the state-owned entity?
Well, I have not been influenced by the Guptas. Acknowledging that I know them is not saying that they influence my decision-making or the way that I think about things. In fact, in the famous Mail and Guardian article only says about me that the Guptas may have influenced my appointment to Transnet, which was about 5 or 6 years ago. An allegation that I denied at the time, and in fact the article does point out that we did deny it at the time, that we are not aware that the Guptas had influenced my appointment to Transnet. So it sounded very flimsy. There is, beyond that, there's no other evidence that has been presented by anyone of influence by the Guptas of myself. And as far as the board goes, I think that the article has pointed out to several relationships between the spouses of board members and some people that may have known the Guptas. Unfortunately, not enough to go by. In fact, we have always said that if there has been any wrongdoing by members of the board, people should come forward. What is interesting is that despite all this heightened feelings about the Guptas and what they may have done or may not have done, there has not been any charges or investigations that have been started by the official structures of the government, for example, the Hawks or the police. There are no investigations that are going on. I suspect simply because there's not enough to go by.
So would you be confident to say, or would it be reasonable to say that if you had to look at, for instance, the Optimum coal mine, which is the main relationship, I would think, between the Gupta interests and Eskom, that after the sale of those assets to Tegeta, that we can assume that the deal that Eskom is getting is better. That means the quality of coal, pricing, etc., is either comparable or significantly better than what was basically the previous deal, and there's no increase in terms of cost, etc., coming through that's beyond what other suppliers of coal have gotten from Eskom. Is that something fair to say? And could you give us some numbers around that?
No, I think you've got it all wrong. We have not said that Tegeta will provide better coal from Optimum than Glencore was providing. What has happened is that Glencore was not giving us good quality coal from Optimum, and in fact they were supposed to supply us at 150 Rand until 2018. They asked us to increase the price to 530 Rand. Glencore did, and we refused. We said we want our coal at 150 Rand a ton until 2018. Whereupon they put the mine into business rescue and sold it to Tegeta. We did not sell the mine to Tegeta. The contract that we have is with Optimum. It is with Optimum under Glencore, and now it has been transferred to Tegeta. The same contract has been transferred to Tegeta. So we have not made any undertakings about the quality of the coal improving under Tegeta. In fact, what we have said is Glencore owes us 2 billion rand, Optimum owes us 2 billion rand, and we are going to continue to pursue that claim. So there have not been any claims of quality being better under Tegeta.
Some interesting insights from Brian Molefe on that interview. We go back now to Ahmed, who's in Cape Town, to get his views on the future outlook for Eskom. Ahmed, we spent quite a bit of time talking about utilities on the African continent, but closer to home, we know that Eskom is in a stable but perhaps still worrisome condition. What do you think Brian Molefe and his team need to focus on to ensure that the promises that they and the president have made around no future load shedding in South Africa can be kept?
Okay, if you look at, I cannot talk on behalf of Eskom, so I'll just do it as an outsider. Right now there is management stability, and obviously the biggest priority of the new management team was to get stability and to bring or put into track the Medupi-Kusile construction to be completed. Unit 6 has already come in, and you'll see they are determined, or they have to be determined, to get the other units online as soon as possible. The IPP program is coming on as well, and you can see there is no load shedding for the last 9 months, so they are doing something right. And at the end of the day, there is renewables coming in, and they will try to, they have to ensure that the other units come on stream. And therefore, this will be quite good for South Africa. And at the end of the day, if you look at it, Eskom still requires a cost-reflective tariff. You know, who's going to subsidize it? Because at the end of the day, in order to produce it, you need expenses to be incurred. Yes, we do understand there's aging fleet, but at the end of the day, any other corporate company goes up, they will sell it at what a fair price is. Why should Eskom be penalized to say you've got to continue subsidizing the customers? It just weakens Eskom's balance sheet. And I think the new management must ensure that they do get a cost-reflective tariff, and obviously have to see that the costs are as most efficient as possible and prudent going forward.
Ahmed, I think that's
you're running a business, yeah.
Ahmed, I think that's an interesting view, because of course we know that NASA, which regulates the tariff that Eskom actually gets, has been very resilient in their argument around making sure that the tariffs remain affordable to the ordinary South African citizen. How do you think this should be resolved? Should NASA cave in and allow for a higher tariff? But what about South Africans who just can't afford it?
Okay, if you look at the challenges Eskom had, was obviously they were trying to keep the lights on. And in order to try to keep the lights on, obviously they had a problem with the generating plant and did not manage to get Medupi and Kusile online, which as a result forced them to use the OCGT peaking power stations as a baseload power station, and that cost money because diesel is much more expensive compared to the coal operations. So what does Eskom do? To say, okay, in order to ensure that I live by whatever the NERSA tariff application was, I won't use diesel. I don't think that was good for the country. So what they did was right for the country. And unfortunately, there's a price to pay. But if we didn't have electricity, I believe that the cost to the economy would have been far greater than what they have spent on diesel.
And just as a final question, as we wrap up, we know that there's been a lot of politics that have been surrounding Eskom and other state-owned entities in South Africa. How do we ensure that the focus remains on keeping the lights on and not on other issues such as the state capture or alleged state capture by the Guptas of Eskom and other state-owned enterprises?
If you look at what Eskom has to do, right, they do have excellent people working for them. They do have excellent, obviously some of their plant is basically old and needs a major maintenance. So that does cost money, but at the end of the day, if you're going forward, I think the new management know what the problems are and they're trying to tackle it. And one way to see that there's going to be no load shedding. So they've been there for some time and they've proven there's no load shedding. So they are doing some things right. But going forward, obviously, they have to bring in the Medupi and Kusile as soon as possible. And in order to bring that on stream, you also need money. And if you're not getting a cost-reflective tariff, where are you going to get the cash? Because at the end of the day, by building the project, you are incurring interest as well in the process. And Eskom right now is paying some of those loans on the new build program, even though they're not generating adequate returns.
Well, a very big
or
thank
adequate
you.
cash flow to fund it.
Thank you so much. Ahmed Jaffer, he is, of course, the chairman of Southern Africa in KPMG and one of the voices that attended Africa Utility Week, bringing us his views on the big conversations and, of course, some insights around the future outlook for Eskom. And that's where we leave it for today for Invest Africa. Thank you so much for making the time to join us. Remember that if you want to comment on the show or give us some ideas of what you'd like to see next, follow us on Twitter at CNBC Africa or at The Real Nosy. And don't forget the hashtag is Invest Africa. Until next time, it's goodbye. Hello and welcome to Invest Africa. I'm Nozi Pombanjwa. Now, the annual Africa Utility Week kicked off in Cape Town last week. And of course, the conference aims to address challenges, developments and opportunities in the power and water sectors. And some of the hot topics that were on the agenda included opportunities around nuclear energy, water scarcity, climate change, as of course, the financial sustainability of power utilities on the continent. On today's episode of Invest Africa, we'll be bringing you a conversation with the CEO of South Africa's own power utility, Eskom, and analysis of the state of the continent's utilities from the chairman of KPMG, responsible for Southern Africa, Ahmed Jaffer. And we start off the conversation with Ahmed, who joins us from Cape Town now. Ahmed, thank you for taking the time once again to join us. You've attended Africa Utility Week. Can you give us a snapshot of what are the big opportunities that you see in this space on the continent, and what are the challenges that we should be mindful of as we seek to diversify the energy mix and bring more reliable energy to the fore?
Okay, just as a quick snapshot, if you look at what's happening in Africa, if all the states can work together, all the countries within Africa can work together, we could have a better energy footprint. Right now within South Africa, obviously, if you're looking at what Eskom is trying to do, is to keep the lights on. And if you look at basically like in 2020 with Medupi coming on stream, online all the units and portion of the Kusile units coming on stream, we should have enough energy supply in South Africa, as well as the renewable energy program. That so far 92 projects have been awarded, but if you go forward, by that time, we should have enough energy. Right now, Eskom has announced there is no load shedding and they don't see any view of it. But if we could just work together, because if you look at, there is the Inga project, if Eskom wants to get power to come to South Africa, they have to still put up a transmission grid all the way from Inga all the way to South Africa. And in order to do that, they have to go through, Zimbabwe, Zambia and Botswana before you could get power. So it's just a question of Africa working together to provide solutions for Africa.
And of course, Ahmed, we know that there are power pools on the African continent that should be the ideal model that does allow African markets and economies to work together. Are these working, the power pools? Are they plugging the gap where they should be bringing more reliability and availability of power to Africans?
At the end of the day, if you look at, I think the South African power pool works quite nicely, but the biggest supplier being Eskom, with the load shedding problems and problems with the plant as such, and not bringing the new plant online, as planned, it has created problems. There is a West African power pool as well, and I think Nigeria is doing its best there. And on the East African side, it is working. But if we all can work together, it will make things better for the whole of Africa, and we can supply more people with electricity, because right now within the sub-Saharan Africa, there's so many people, about 600 million without electricity. And going into Africa, you can see what the problems we're facing. But we just need more investments. We do have the USAID investment coming in. I think it's around about $43 million. So things are happening. Things are being constructed. And I think we just got to be a bit patient.
Ahmed, I'm going to come to the investment question a little bit later around how we increase investment. But let's maybe just come back to the trade-offs that have to be made as we're looking for cleaner sources of energy. Africa has been in the past heavily reliant on coal power for base load. How are we doing in terms of transitioning to cleaner sources of energy on the continent?
If you look at, we have a rich supply of renewables. You know, we have the wind, we have the solar, and we have hydros within Africa. And if we could just harness that and build those projects, we should be fine. Because with the renewables, it will be clean energy. And if you look at what's happening worldwide, where you'll see that most of the companies, the bigger utilities, are closing down their fossil fuel side and going predominantly on the renewable side.
Now, gas and nuclear...
If they can do it, we can do it. Yep, sorry.
So just let's bring gas and nuclear into the conversation. We've seen gas discoveries in markets such as Mozambique. And of course, nuclear has always been a very top or hot topic that's been raging on here in South Africa. Where are we in terms of integrating these into the broader energy mix?
Okay, it is part of the integrated resource plan. It has been planned for 9,600 megawatts of nuclear power. Some time to come through. Obviously, it's an expensive option, but we do need base load power in South Africa. And if we got excess power, we can sell it across the borders as well. So it will be a good thing for South Africa. It's just how we go about procuring the nuclear plant as such, because it will be very expensive. And if it's expensive, somebody's going to pay for it, and it's going to be the consumer, unless government want to subsidize a portion of it.
And financial sustainability is always going to be a big part of this conversation, Ahmed. I mean, if we talk about Eskom, we've seen them applying for tariffs, not getting the rate that they want. We've seen them going to the debt markets to raise capital. But broadly on the continent, would we say that our power utilities are at risk when it comes to their financial sustainability?
Look, your biggest challenge is, as long as the tariffs are not cost reflective, that will put a strain on the utility. But if government can guarantee the loans as well as repayment of interest as well as the loan repayments, and eventually try to achieve a cost reflectivity over a number of years, the bankers should be comfortable as such. Obviously, if we do get a downgrade or we become into junk status, that would just increase our cost of capital. And that wouldn't be a good thing for the utilities, because somebody has to carry that cost. And right now, it looks like the government will have to carry that cost.
So if the government is carrying mostly the cost to run these utilities, where does this leave the debate on privatization?
Look, at the end of the day, the government can only do so much. They only have so much cash. And if they don't have cash, you know what I mean, your long-term projections or your long-term plans to build or increase your megawatt capacity in the country. So if government can only spend 5,000 megawatts, but the country needs 20,000, see, it does impact on the country, because the government doesn't have cash to provide to build the additional infrastructure. So it does impact on the country as well as on the population. So that's the challenge that government's got. They can come to a point, but they can't go all the way. Therefore, the private sector investment is very important. And if you look at our renewable energy program, see how successful it is. The funders are getting basically a good internal rate of return, and therefore they're investing so much.
One of the key issues, though, with the renewable program has been the tariffs, Ahmed, because with trying to make sure that the tariffs are palatable to the citizens, this to some extent takes away the appetite from the investors who are looking for a better economic return on their investment. How do we break out of this conundrum?
If you look at, like, internationally, the price of renewables is around about 3 cents per US cents. And if you compare it into South Africa, it's quite high. The other lowest number is for Morocco, which is 2.99 US cents. If you're looking at in South Africa, we were ranging around about 11.95. It was quite high. So therefore, in Africa, we also have to come down with the cost. So if you look at round 1, round 2, the prices were high, but the whole idea was to give comfort to the investors. You will get a good rate of return. Yes, the government will come to the party. Yes, the original equipment manufacturers will come to the party. So all of them know where the risk lies. But if you look at it now, the round 1 and 2, I still believe our rates are high. If you compare it to internationally at 3 US cents, but if you look at it like going around to round 4 and around 4.5, I think the rates will come down substantially. But with the weakening of the rand, yes, we have a problem.
Ahmed, one of the issues around the renewable program, of course, has been the success and how we've all been talking about how this should be replicated in other African markets. Are we beyond the point of talking? Have we been seeing this model being picked up and this framework being used?
If you look at what's happening in Africa, there's about $43 million being committed to do renewable energy projects. But at the end of the day, South Africa has implemented it very well. It's a workable solution. Everybody knows who takes the risk as such, and the investors are getting a more than adequate rate of return. With the rounds 4 and 5, obviously the rates are coming down, but the financiers are quite innovative, and so is the people running the renewable energy projects. So therefore, if you see what's happening, so the other African countries are seeing what we've done in South Africa. It's like a role model for everybody else, and I think eventually things will be happening in Africa, but with $43 million invested in this area being committed, there will be a major difference in Africa. And if you look at Africa Utility Week, there's always a CEO forum where all the utility CEOs talk to one another and share their common concerns. So wherever you are, you have the same problems. Yeah. And I think by talking together, the CEOs in Africa, the utility CEOs, they will be able to make a difference.
Right. Well, on that note of making a difference and working together, let's take a short break. When we come back, we're bringing you the interview with the CEO of Eskom in South Africa, Brian Molefe, and also we get Ahmed's views on the future of Eskom from an analysis point of view. We'll see you in 2 minutes.